So de Blasio is showing racial division in America's largest city, but some of his employees are even more effective at it. The chancellor of the city's schools, the largest public school system in the United States, Richard Carranza, is leading the charge. He's spearheading the effort to abolish merit-based admissions to the city's magnet schools, famous magnet schools, the only successful schools in the city. Why? Because Asians have been too successful there, and we can't have that. A recent lawsuit, by the way, accuses Carranza of demoting certain employees purely on the basis of their skin color. And during so-called racial equity training sessions, teachers were expressly told to give more attention and help to students based on the color of their skin. This is happening right now in New York City, out in the open. Heather McDonald is the author of the book, The Diversity Delusion, and she joins us tonight. So, Heather, I know we're not supposed to say this because we're supposed to pretend this is totally fine, but why is this different from Jim Crow exactly?
Because we're supposed to believe that whites are the source of all evil in society, and that discrimination against whites is compatible with the constitutional ban on all discrimination. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has basically embraced that in allowing racial discrimination in college admissions in the name of diversity. What's going on that's slightly different in New York City right now is the diversity rationale for racial discrimination, which now seems almost quaint in its sort of white bread nature, is being replaced by something far more vicious and far more hating, which is the idea of toxic white culture. And this is a test. You know, if Carranza and de Blasio get away with this, it shows that the ideology of hatred and racial division that is now absolutely pervasive in our higher education system is entrenching itself throughout the rest of society, that will lead to, I fear, a state of very, very dangerous racial tension in our society.
I don't understand how decent people can allow this to happen. I really don't. And I mean, I think all throughout the New York City school system, there are decent people. I know some of them. And there's certainly a lot of decent people who live in the city and whose kids go to the schools. How can they sit back and allow children, little kids, to be attacked on the basis of their skin color? How can they allow that?
People are cowed by the charge of racism, obviously. I mean, Richard Carranza, in demoting 3 white women and justifying what he's doing in his racial crusade within the hierarchy of schools, said, well, 75% of school students are black and Hispanic. Now that they have senior administrators who look like them, what's wrong with that? Let's just acknowledge the lunacy of this. No student knows who's buried deep in the bowels of the Department of Education that knows the color of senior administration. The desperation to justify, to explain away the black academic achievement gap is so great that we're now claiming that some bureaucrat in the bowels is going to make a difference to whether black kids succeed. The public has to stand up and fight against this myth of bias and say that there are behavioral differences that explain outcomes. If white privilege explained everything, please tell me how 7 out of 8 of the recent National Spelling Bee champions were Indian Americans. If skin color was the scourge of people of color, they would not be able to succeed. In fact, why did they succeed, Tucker? Because they studied their butts off. And that's what inner city kids have to start doing.
And a lot of them do it, you know, Bronx Science and Hunter College High School and the high-level merit-based high schools in New York City. I mean, they have amazing outcomes. They're not majority white schools, not even close.
No,
and
there's
now
no white privilege against Asians.
Well, exactly.
I mean, they're neither white nor privileged. These are poor Asians that have a culture of academic achievement. That is what needs to spread. Again, as long as the myth of bias remains the only allowable explanation for socioeconomic and racial disparities, the left wins. More and more people have to stand up and say this is not a racist society. There's not a single mainstream institution in this country which is not sub rosa doing what Richard Carranza is doing, which is hiring and promoting on the basis of race. It is a benefit, if you're applying to Harvard, if you're applying to any selective school in the country, to be black and Hispanic. It's same with in Microsoft recently, a female actually complained publicly about the anti-white male bias in that corporation. This is ubiquitous, Tucker. We have to fight back against the myth of bias.
Well, and it's totally immoral, I would say. Heather, great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tucker.